August 20th, 2025 meeting of the City of St. Pete Beach Finance and Budget Committee. Let's stand for the national anthem. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank goodness you didn't make me sing.
Roll call, please.
Member English,
Here.
Member Allen,
Here.
Vice Chair Geiger,
Here.
Member Polanowski,
Here.
Chair Samaradzich.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Any changes to the agenda as published?
I'd like to add a discussion about equitable distribution of taxpayer funds to districts.
Equitable distribution.
To districts.
Would you like to do that first?
At the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other changes? Somebody move to approve the change to the agenda?
I move to approve the change to the agenda.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, first item is the tentative budget book and summary of changes from previous version. What's changed?
All right. So I'm going to take the Finance Budget Review Committee through some of our changes for the tentative budget book that was presented and sent out to you all. So to kick us off, I do have a presentation, and for the record, I'm Devin Schmidt, Finance Director for the city. So just kind of a quick level setting as we're looking at what our agenda is today. So we'll just go through some introduction, summary of changes, talk about the Government Finance Officers Association additions to the budget and why that's important. We'll talk about the summary of changes in a text format, and then we'll look at the numbers of that. Introduce what we're calling a performance management system for the city. A good portion of what we'll spend on today is some financial policy review, and we'll talk a lot about that. Then we'll look at how those changes have impacted the different funds, what that looks like from a budgetary basis, and then be looking for your recommendations on changes and what we can submit to the City Commission, and then talk a little bit about next steps as we progress through the rest of the year and what that looks like. So to kick it off, I'm going to dive into our Government Finance Officer best practice alignment. So this tentative budget book was a bit longer than some of the other previous versions that you received, and the reason behind that is for the first time ever, the city is going to apply for the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award. And for the city, it's not necessarily about the award, but what it does for us is it gives us a continuous feedback from a national level of to ensure that we're following best practices when we're looking at our budgetary documents. So that's the reason for the application. We get back a full listing of comments from a national level of folks that are part of that National Advisory Council on GFOA's board, and so we can take that, implement it, and be a part of the almost 2,000 governments that participate in the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award. So some of those pieces just to understand about what that looks like and where we've included that as part of this budget process is, one, we have a city manager message that is looking at addressing our challenges and opportunities in the city. So what at the highest level was our intent behind what we put in the budget. A community profile, so when we're looking at our community, what are the demographics, how many people live here, what is the age ranges, should we be looking at things like parks, for example, or should we not, based on the demographics of our community, and what does that look like? Inlaying in our strategic roadmap and alignment, so at the highest level, are we aligning with our policies that our commission has set, and how does that articulate into our budget process? And then the financial policies, this is something that we're including as part of our budget process. While we've always had financial policies by way of charter or just internally or as part of our annual comprehensive financial report, this gives us the opportunity to look at those annually in a given year for the commission and this committee to review and say, you know, maybe we should look at changing that. So for example, you know, let's say the fund balance is a big one that we'll talk about today, but let's say, for example, this committee or the commission says, you know, we'd rather see 40 or 50% fund balance reserve in the event, you know, we start having some large storms occur year over year. That might be an example of an area where we want to have that flexibility as part of our processes. The budget calendar and approval process, I mean, the budget in and of itself is a storytelling document. It's a plan. It's one of the most important documents that the commission looks at every year. And so having that out there publicly for the community to know these are the different engagement points and steps where they can come and participate in this group or come to public comment and provide their feedback. And then the other piece that we've added in as part of one of those GFOA best practices is just looking at our largest revenue sources, trends, and history so we can see how those are changing over time, what does that look like, and how we can apply those to our 10-year financial forecast. So with that, I'll kind of dive into one of our bigger items here. So
May I just ask a quick question?
absolutely, yeah. And feel free to stop me as we go through.
Do they edit it and we have to, do they approve our budget, or is it just more best practice guidance, or?
So when we submit it to them, we have to meet different categories of criteria. Some of those are mandatory, some of those are recommended. And what they'll do is they'll say meets, proficient, or excellent, for example. And so in each one of those categories, our goal would be to move towards that excellence each year.
But it wouldn't preclude us from doing our budget and moving forward.
Not at all. No. Nope. It's just an opportunity and a feedback cycle for us to get that continuous feedback and improvement so that at a national level, we're able to show and kind of showcase that our budgetary practices are, you know, within line some of those national cities that are following sort of a performance excellence standard. So
That's great.
yeah, it's a good opportunity for us to look at it. I mean, we have the auditors every year that are looking at what actually happened. This is a group that's looking at our budget and just to say, here's best practices. They're the ones who set the best practices at that governmental level for government finance. And so we want to be able to align with what their practices, procedures, and recommendations are. So yeah, we're excited about the opportunity and that we were able to pull everything together in the time frame that we were. So looking at our fund balance changes, so a little backstory and history here. The city completed our annual comprehensive financial report and our audit July 31st. So our prior workshops were really looking at unaudited financials on our balance sheet information. On a typical year, we would want to complete that by March 31st. With staff changeover, hurricanes, all of the different pieces and parts that challenged our ability to complete that in a timely fashion of the March 31st. And so best practice and moving forward, what we would like to accomplish is that we're completing that financial report first as the launch into budget, because that's really our starting point of our figures. So with that, when we're pulling together the budget, what we're typically looking at is that unassigned fund balance. So you can see on the screen there that unassigned fund balance, and we're looking at that from the balance sheet. That's our launch point of here's our funding that we have available to utilize for the future years as we're looking at the budget process. What we discovered is that there is a $5.8 million that was not previously included in our fund balance in the general fund that was by resolution back in 2022. And the intent there from reading some of the resolution documents is that it was to be utilized for things like hurricanes, to supplement our wastewater fund, which we've shared with this group and the community and commission, that's not really a best practice for us to subsidize our enterprise funds with general fund or tax dollars, essentially. And then it could be utilized for any sort of capital projects, including some subaquatic resiliency projects and things of that nature. What we also think may have occurred is that in 2023 with the resiliency fund, that the intent may have been to transfer that, but with staff changeover, that maybe did not occur. So what we're recommending, and what you'll see throughout this budget, is that we're recommending that 5.8 million be transferred over to the resiliency fund, and any of those projects that we work with public services to identify that meet that resiliency criteria defined by our comp plan would be earmarked and placed into that fund. The other thing that this allowed us to do is look at, and which we're looking at anyway, is anything above our 35% operating expenditures, excluding our transfers out, would be that dollar amount that we would recommend we hold over in the general fund balance to account for any emergency expenditures. With this being part of the assigned fund balance for the city, it's not as available for a city manager to utilize in the event of a hurricane or a storm or things of that nature. So while the intent was to hold that funding over, our recommendation is that we move it to our resiliency fund, since we're going to be able to, I'll show you, we do have the 35% moving forward. So any questions about that before I move on to our next?
Yes.
Go for it.
So as far as accounting wise, and over this past month, I realized that people do watch these meetings, so I might just explain things a little bit too much for anybody who's watching it who doesn't know about balance sheets and income statements. Is this a result of the balance sheet not tying into the income statement, the fund statements?
So this is a result of when we're developing the budget, what we have done is we've looked at our balance sheet. And our balance sheet, because of when we were doing those post-closing entries, when we complete our annual comprehensive financial report or when we do the audit, what we were looking at was technically 2023 balance sheet items when we were pulling forward the budget. And because we were late in completing our annual comprehensive financial report, if we had that information in March, then we would have had that be our launch point. So instead of we do look at the income statement, obviously, but what we're looking at when we're pulling into our fund balance, we're looking at that unassigned fund balance from the balance sheet.
So is the answer yes?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
That was a long way to explain that.
So just for anybody who's out there that doesn't know, your balance sheet means it has to tie to your income statement. So your income statement, the fund balances end up coming over, and you'll see it at the bottom. I think it's probably on the screen right now there, but at the bottom here, and it should tie directly into our income statements and fund balances. What they're saying is that the balance sheet that we were using was an old balance sheet, correct? And the income statement that we were using was a new income statement. So there was, until the auditors did this audit, that they didn't tie together, right? So this is the thing that I was getting irritated about with the temporary finance director, how I kept on saying, are we balancing the balance sheet? Are we reconciling the balance sheet? We need to do this on a regular basis. I know we've already talked about it. I know that you know the importance of it, but this is what happens when we don't do that. So my follow-up question is, this isn't cash. We didn't find cash, and I'm mainly talking for them. We didn't find cash. What we found was a reserve in a fund balance. Should I explain that, or did you want to explain that? Okay, so no, so the fund balance is basically earmarked. So our cash was the same. It's not like we found $6 million in cash that somebody was hiding. We found a fund balance that doesn't tie to the cash. And this is the way that we reconciled. And I think this was on the management letter. We're probably getting a management letter about this too, from the auditors.
Yeah, so we do the 26th, the auditors will be presenting the annual comprehensive financial report to the commission with the management letter and that information as well.
And is there anything else on the management letter that you know of right now that we should be aware of?
There is 3 what we would call deficiencies or audit recommendations. No material weaknesses or things of that nature, but recommendations from the auditors. There's 3 that aren't related to this.
Okay. So this is just a frustration of the past Like, and I hate to blame somebody who's not here to defend themselves, but this is why I always get so upset about the balance sheet not being reconciled on a regular basis. So,
So moving forward as we work through, and part of what we've been doing and looking at our existing staff is we're working on cross-training. The other component that we need to get back in place is where we're doing a month-end close process each month, so that we're able to be in lockstep, and then essentially by the time we get to that audit process, for the most part, we're going to be reconciling our fixed assets, but we're also just looking at the month of essentially September. That's the process that we need to get into. But again, the challenge that we've had is leadership changeover, and then we've ran in, and then with the hurricanes, it just has completely made it challenging. The finance team itself is a very talented group of folks. Their skills are fantastic, and I feel very fortunate to walk into that, but it's the lack of institutional knowledge that went out the door when leadership changed over. So that's where we're at a place where we're working on cross-training, we're working on collating our audit schedule and our ACFR schedule with the budget process. So at any given time, we know where we're at, and we'll be providing updates to Francis on that. You know, we're on track, we're behind, here's where we're at on each one of these processes. And so looking forward, this is not an expectation. July 31st, and I would always say this, to be doing your budget and the audit at the same time can be very catastrophic for reasons like this. And so the other piece that we'll look to do with the auditors is, as we're working through that, we'll be doing those post-closing entries or things of that nature. So we're doing that at the same time that they're pulling the information together, since our auditors are the ones who complete and pull together our financial statements for us.
and this is what happens when we hire a part-time director of finance that's doing 7 other cities too.
Yes, we were there, and
And then, do you think once a year we'll probably reconcile? Do you think maybe quarterly will make it easier? Like, what's your recommendation on that? I'll go with whatever you think is right.
Yeah, no, and we have, within our financial policies, what we wanted to start doing on a consent agenda is bring our income statement, balance sheet, budget to actuals on a quarterly basis to the commission. And we would bring that to this group too as well, but we would have it as a consent agenda item, just so, you know, everyone's aware where we're at on a quarterly basis.
excellent.
And that's part of the financial policies that we'll chat about today too.
Yeah, just to point out, the financial policies you're going to see today, we didn't have any when we walked in, other than the charter, which is a overarching legislative document that does not tell you how to run your city. It just simply says, here are the guardrails you must not cross over. So I think that's also important to know, that those financial policies going forward, if a new administration came in, those would be an adopted budget book. So it's not something hiding on a shelf somewhere, that they would automatically know where to go and look, pick it up and go from there. And then again, it's up for review and changes every year with the seated commission and finance committee.
And I think as far as the launch point for those financial statements, since we're going to be heading into that area here shortly, we did look at the Government Finance Officers Association does a fiscal policy challenge. And so we went and looked out there to say who's really good at posting this, you know, with their financial policies. The other piece we looked at is anything that's currently existing in our annual comprehensive financial report and our city charter, to make sure that that's all in alignment, and then Florida state law inclusive in that as well. So when we were looking at developing these policies, those are the different areas that we went at and looked at to say, how can we implement these policies in a fashion that are in line with best practices, but also what we already have existing, and make sure that they align with charter as well. So any other questions about that piece? But I think that's a really good call. We didn't find cash. So
The first thing you see in here is that amount of money, and you're like, oh, we're rich now. So,
yeah, so, all right. So when we're looking at the summary of changes, one of the pieces is that we're looking at is a implementation of a performance evaluation. Right now, what we have within the city or what's included in the budget is a 2.6 cost of living adjustment. What we've identified that would be a good approach for us moving forward for retention and recruitment efforts is if we were able to add in a performance evaluation tool for employees. So these are the different areas that we'd be looking at. So right now what we added into this budget is 1.5% across the board for kind of a budgetary placeholder. And we're working with the strategic leadership team and city management to develop a plan that would have definitions behind each one of these areas. But what we'd be looking at is if an employee is at an area where they're under performance or they're on a performance improvement plan, that we would hold over that cost of living adjustment until the minimum performance standards are met. Then we would have that next category for folks that are meeting their performance, so they're getting that cost of living adjustment plus 0, so that they're just getting that cost of living adjustment. And then we would be looking at good performance. They would have the opportunity for the cost of living adjustment plus a 1%. And then our high performance, typically about 20% of the organization would be receiving that cost of living adjustment plus a 2%. I talked a little bit about that 5.8 million, but I am going to jump down to that budget vacancy for larger departments that have natural attrition. So historically, the city's been budgeting for the thought process that we would be 100% staffed. And we know in some of our larger departments, just through natural attrition, folks moving on or going to different cities, that we're never 100% staffed, so we've been holding over that budgetary. So what we've applied in this budget cycle is that for our larger departments like public services, community development, library, parks and recreation, and fire, having just a budget vacancy where we're not holding budget over when we know that typically they're not fully staffed. So that was one of the avenues that we're looking at as we try to get closer to that 96% budget to actuals, as well as an opportunity for us to look at how can we incentivize and be a high-performing organization and offer that to our employees. Any questions about that before I jump to our resiliency projects? Okay. So the 5.8 million, that is a transfer that you'll see out of the general fund, transferring over to resiliency projects. So when we were looking at what projects meet some of that criteria, these projects came kind of to the forefront where we're looking at any shoreline protection improvement, seawall replacement, our watershed management master plan, and then these 3 adaptation projects were all projects, while some of them are not part of fiscal year FY26. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like for the future years. We thought it was important to take those out of either the stormwater fund or the capital projects fund, which is really intended for streets or recreations or some of those operational components that exist within the general fund, and put it into this resiliency fund as defined by the comp plan. The other area where we have some changes is reappropriation projects. So these are projects that straddle 2 fiscal years. So maybe they got started in 2025 and we have an open encumbrance for that project. And so the intent would be to move budget forward in 2026. And so you can see what those projects are. One that I am going to highlight is Fire Station 22. With looking at what we have for our balance sheet in the general fund, we did allocate an additional $2 million. So you'll see Fire Station 22 going up from $5 million that was proposed in workshop number 4 up to that $7 million in workshop number 5 that we're in today. And then we were looking at, sharpening our pencil, looking at some of our replacement vehicles for code. Originally, we were looking to try to replace some of our electric vehicles in the sense that they're not the best vehicles to respond when we're having a storm event because of what seawater does to the electric batteries. So we decided that we'll hold on to those for an additional year, and so we pulled those out of the budget as well. Any questions on that part? Okay. So I talked about it in the text format. This is looking at it in a number format, so you can see by fund and department what we looked at in workshop number 4 versus what we're proposing an increase or decrease in workshop number 5. So a lot of those I've already talked about. We have the performance evaluations in there. One I didn't talk about was our audit. So we did receive back our audit information for our next year engagement letter. Originally what we had placed in there was a little bit less expensive than what previously was proposed. The other piece that makes us a little bit different than prior budget years is we kind of spread out that audit cost throughout some of the different funds. What we're looking at doing this year is bringing that fully back into finance so that we're able to potentially do a cost allocation down the road for future years instead of having that broken out. The other piece is with our FEMA funding, we'll have a higher single audit because we've met that $1 million threshold. It used to be $750,000, now it's $1 million threshold. So we will have a higher single audit just based on the FEMA expenses that we incurred in 2025. And then that direct maintenance line item, that is a handrail that we were actually able to replace in this fiscal year, so we went ahead and pulled that out of the budget. And then you can see the different transfers there. The transfer to stormwater we did remove since we're moving the Don Cesar adaptation resiliency project over to the resiliency fund. So we did go ahead and remove that $400,000. And then you can see that vacancy budget factor as well applied into the budget. So I'm not going to spend too much time, but this is our city manager's budget message. As I mentioned before, that having a city manager budget message gives us the opportunity for folks to kind of get in and understand what we were thinking about as we were developing this budget process. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. It was included in the packet, but just wanted to highlight that for the first time we do have a city manager's message that's looking at policies, procedures, and kind of the philosophical thought process behind the budget.
I like that. It's really well done.
Great. No, we just have the organizational chart, so no changes here that the committee would need to pay attention to. I talked a little bit about this community overview, but again, when we're thinking about the financial picture for the city, looking and understanding the demographics of our community, I think are really important, even down to how big is our city, what's the population, what is our median age range, what type of amenities do these folks want to see? And then kind of looking at our local economy, our government infrastructure, how do we even operate as an organization? I think is all important factors when we're looking through the budget process. And so that's just another GFOA best practice to include as part of your budget process. Financial policies. All right, so let's dive into those financial policies. So the way this is broken out is we start out with that purpose and oversight, and then what we're doing here is we're talking about the different funds that are managed by the city. I won't go through one of those definitions. We did that at budget workshop number 1, but the reason why outlining these is important, one is, as Francis mentioned, that's an opportunity for anybody that comes into the city or anybody in the public that wants to know, they can understand these are our different funds that exist within the city. The other piece that as we work through our financial policies, and since this is something we'll review on an annual basis, is that as staff we might come to this committee and say, we'd like to set up, for example, a technology replacement fund or a building maintenance fund, and then that gives us the opportunity to put it as part of the budget process, define it, and the committee and the commission can say, looks good, or have you thought about this? So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go through all of those. So and feel free to stop, I'll pause on each one of these slides moving forward, because getting the feedback and recommendation from the committee on these policies is critical to our process. But when we're looking at our budget policies and procedures, some of the more obvious ones is that we're going to comply with our federal, state, and local requirements when we're adopting a budget, and a balanced budget, which at its core means that our revenues and reserves must equal our expenditures. So we're not going to go into the negative essentially in a budget basis. That we're going to be working through a process where we have our workshops that are public, that our proposed budget is online for any residents to review, comment, that we have the 2 public hearings that are held for final adoption, and that we're going to be looking at long-term multi-year planning as we're looking at our revenue and expenditure forecast to just guide those effective financial plannings. When we're thinking about the prioritization, that we would be looking at essential services first, so prioritizing those and making sure that those are maintained unless the commission directs otherwise, and that our budgetary growth will generally follow a regional CPI where we're not trying to grow above and beyond that. For our cost management, if we're looking at lower priority services, maybe programs that aren't as popular, those would be eliminated first versus our essential services, and then looking at our user fees and how those are considered as we look at some alternative service offerings or cuts. In our workforce stability, so the city would strive to avoid layoffs of any permanent employees, and we'd be looking to use attrition where possible if we were in that situation. But in the event we were, we would be looking to see if we could move existing full-time positions into any open positions in a different department. And then our fiscal responsibility is that we'd be looking at our current expenditures are paid with our current revenues or reserves, so that our long-term debt isn't necessarily used for those operating costs. So pause for a second there.
Good with that.
Okay. All right, continuing on with our budgetary policies here. So we would be we would be looking to avoid budget practices that would push today's costs essentially into future years. So not postponing any of those critical expenses, accruing future revenues, or rolling over the short-term debt would be something that we would not be looking to do. That our budget would ensure that we have adequate maintenance and timely replacement of capital assets and equipment, so that we're not holding over some of those infrastructure challenges that we're currently seeing and we're existing in that break-fix environment. So that's an area there. When we're looking at our funding, we have to make sure that we have sufficient funding for our annual debt payments. And then we would also be looking at any cost-effective technology or capital investments that would help us reduce our operating costs. Those would be ones that could be a priority for us. Looking at our controls for budgetary controls, so we'd be looking at, we already have an encumbrance system. We are implementing an enterprise resource planning system that will also have an encumbrance system. But with that, it gives us the ability that if we have an existing contract, we have an encumbrance that's tied to that, so that funding would be obligated and no longer available. And then this is where we'd be looking to bring those quarterly financial reports to commission, looking at budget to actuals, balance sheet, income statements as well. We're going to be striving to get our performance and transparency, so showing our service levels and performance measures would be integrated into the budget and aligned with our strategic plan. This is something that staff is working on currently. It's not currently in our budget today, but that will be something that we're looking forward to in 2027. Enterprise fund self-sufficiency, we've talked a lot about this, but ensuring that those funds are self-supporting and that we have the appropriate charges, and that the general fund isn't subsidizing those. And then that the number of approved positions or full-time equivalents can exceed without commission approval. When we're looking at our capital improvement plan and our operating budgets, that we're coordinating those to account for any ongoing costs of capital projects. So if we were to add in, for example, a pickleball court, do we need someone to manage and operate that pickleball court? I don't know, that's an example. And then just our commitment to excellence. So annually, starting in 2026 budget year, we will be going for that GFOA Distinguished Budget Award presentation for our continuous improvement. And then where we're moving into now, this just talks about the basis of our budgetary accounting. So we're utilizing what the Government Accounting Standards Board or the GAP principles for a modified accrual basis for our proprietary funds with some modifications. So we are budgeting for things like principal payments, but things like depreciation isn't something that we would budget for.
Can we go back to the last slide real quick?
Sure.
So going back to the quarterly reports, I guess that $6 million is killing me right now. Can we specify which reports we have in here?
Sure.
Because I know that a lot of people get very comfortable with the income statement, and that the balance sheet can easily be cut out again.
So would you recommend that we have balance sheet, income statement, fund balances, investment performance? Okay.
No, I think that's too much work
Okay.
on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
Yeah, just those three.
Okay.
Unless anybody else, like, I think this should be a group conversation. We don't want to, like, paralyze them with putting together information, but we do want the required. And unfortunately, we are making up for our predecessors dropping the ball. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Okay. All right, we've made note of that, and we'll include that in our recommendation to the commission. This is talking about, again, the government accounting principles, so that just talks about the different areas that we wouldn't budget for, and I've already spoken about that. Developing the budget, we did include a calendar, which we'll show here, but essentially this is talking about we will need to have the proposed budget before September 1st. We've been working through that process very early this year and bringing it in different chunks and phases to this group. Adoption and transfers. So what this is talking about when we're looking at our annual budget that is adopted by fund, department, with the following funds that we currently have today. And then from our city charter, you can see that anytime during the fiscal year that the city manager may transfer any unexpended appropriations between one account to another in the same department. But if we were to transfer between departments, then we would need to bring that and have that approved by the city commission. By ordinance, the city commission can increase any budgetary figure, but it cannot be above and beyond what we have for revenues or available fund balance. So that's essentially what we're talking about when we're looking at that budgetary accounting item. We thought it was important for us to show kind of our fund structure. So you can see here that at the very top, we're looking at what's governmental versus proprietary funds. We have our general fund, our special revenue, and then our enterprise funds, and what department has authority essentially to spend within each one of those different funds. So that's just a basic fund structure format for to include and kind of a map for us to have as part of our budget. All right, looking at our fund balance, financial policies. So what we're looking to do here is look at our unassigned fund balance in the general fund for emergency purposes or liquidity purposes of 25%. And this is looking at having alignment with the GASB statement number 54. So those definitions of what we're looking at there is either non-spendable, restricted, or unrestricted. And so what we're proposing is that we'd have a minimum fund balance target of 25% within our general fund to ensure that we have that liquidity in the event we have a major emergency or storm event. And then on top of that, since we know what it looks like from a Helene or a Milton, kind of that very catastrophic dollar figure, that's where we're adding on the additional 10%. And then we'd be looking to replenish within 3 years, either using surplus, FEMA reimbursements, or insurance proceeds to backfill that funding on an annual basis. Any questions or comments on that category? Okay. So as we're continuing on here, this is talking about just our investments in capital. So the other component that we would want to do is, if we're looking at anything above and beyond that 35%, we would want to divert that to either our capital projects fund or our resiliency fund. We would have a staff recommendation each year that says, here's our recommendation, that it either goes to capital or resiliency, but it would be with the commission approval of how we want to spend that funding, so that we're not just holding over additional funding within our operations. So the intent here isn't to grow our operations more than that CPI factor that we talked about in the prior policies, but the intent would be for us to transfer that over, anything above that 35%. And then any pieces where we're looking at that unassigned fund balance, we may have a request that we're going to bring forward something that would be longer than one operating period with the approval of the city commission. And then all of the fund balances and budgeted funds would be presented in the annual budget as we're showing today. When we're looking at our revenue policies, one of the things that we brought forward this year is the opportunity for the commission to review and set that millage rate. So showing them the differences of revenue and those opportunities, not having a staff recommendation on that, but really letting the commission review and recommend how we want to move forward on that. And then it just talks about the property tax timeline and what that looks like as far as when we would expect to receive those revenues, since the ad valorem is the largest revenue within our general fund. Our user fees, what we're looking at there again is to recover the full cost of those services, review and update as needed, and that's one of the processes that this committee is aware that we're working through our fee study. Revenue flexibility, so this is looking at the city avoiding targeting specific revenues for special programs to maintain budget flexibility, but looking for opportunities where we can seek grants and capital improvements, and then just kind of codifying where we're looking at our approach to how can we aggressively seek out federal and state grants for any future project needs.
I think we ought to look.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we ought to look also into some of these nonprofits that also have grants for the environment and things like that. We talked about looking at natural shoreline and things like that. There are non-governmental organizations that do have city grants. Now, it probably requires somebody who knows how to write grants.
Which we do have folks within the city now. That was one of the additions that our city manager put in place. So we do have several folks that are grant writing abilities, so
Bravo.
yes.
I think that'll pay off.
And then I was just going to ask, when are the results of the fee study going to be back?
I think we're looking, I'm looking at October, end of October.
Okay.
So the plan here is, with the fee studies, is to adopt this budget and then bring the fee studies back with a plan, because two of the major fee studies are on enterprise funds, the wastewater and the stormwater. And if there are any increases, I can already tell you, without even seeing it, that the recommendation would be to go to capital, because we've balanced your budget on operations.
Gotcha.
So we're going to be looking at that and what would be feasible, what would be a phased-in approach, what are the differences between residential and commercial, those sort of, it'll be a pretty robust
Yeah.
meeting.
While we're having a discussion, I was going to wait till the end of revenue policies, but I need to understand our revenue recognition policies too. It doesn't have to be on here, but just for going forward. So I have a couple revenues here, and I just need to know like when we book it as revenue. And again, for the cameras, that you can book revenue either when invoices go out, when money is received, that's what the modification is to GAAP or GASB, or like if it's a fine, when it goes to the special magistry, or when it's concluded. So there's different times that you can recognize the revenue, And I think it's important that we know as a committee when we recognize revenue. So on real estate taxes, when do we recognize revenue for that?
When it's received.
When it's received, so it's
Yes.
cash basis?
Yep, cash
Okay.
basis.
Fines.
Fines, I believe that one is when it's received as well. I can follow up on that one. It's a smaller portion of our revenue stream, but I'll follow up on that and reconfirm.
Okay, maybe. Memberships?
Memberships are when it's received.
Received, okay. Rent.
Rent, I believe, is when we invoice for it.
Invoice, and do you know, is it booked on a straight line basis, or is it booked on an accelerating basis based on the lease?
That one I'll have to reconfirm with you because we have different lease agreements for each one of the different leases that we have. So Paradise Grill is going to be different than what we have even with the Mary Pier Bait Shack, for example. And then we have different, especially with the storms, we made some modifications to some of those. So, but I can follow up on you with that.
I think GAAP requires us to do it on a straight line basis based on the full lease. So if we give them like free rent, we have to include those months of free rent. Like, I don't know if we do, so if anybody's renting space from us, I'm not saying we're giving free rent, but we have to adjust it for a straight line, I think.
Yeah,
in the GAAP.
yep.
So that is invoiced, so that's accrual basis. Do we have any like user fees that we would, I guess we do have user fees. How are they booked? Are they booked on a cash basis too?
I believe the user fees are booked on a cash basis, but I can reconfirm that one as well.
And then any reimbursements from government is based on an estimated amount, right? So that's accrued.
Yes, yep. So that one, anytime we're expending the funds and then we're going through and requesting on a quarterly basis, depending on the grant, that would be on an accrued basis.
Okay.
And then that would show up by way of our single audit.
And then if we accrue it, we estimate it, and then say we get more or less, then it's adjusted at the time we get
Yes,
the funds.
yep.
Okay. That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so,
I cut you off. You were at debt service, I think.
oh, okay, sorry about that. Thank you. No, you're fine. Okay, so our debt policies, so what we're looking at here is that we would issue bonds for capital improvements. And then whenever possible, we'd be looking at utilizing special assessments revenue to support some of those bonds instead of general obligation bonds. We would be looking at not having any of those general obligation bonds to be no greater than 10% of any of those non-exempt assessed valuations for real property. When we're looking at those do require a ballot initiative, and so typically that hasn't been an approach that the city has done. When we're looking at any of the term of the bonds, we'd be looking to not exceed the useful life of the expenditure being financed. So we wouldn't want to bond for something for 10 years if it has a useful life of 5 years, for example. We would be looking at purchasing private bonds at the issuance if that's a cost-effective manner for us. And then the city would look to defease any existing bonds issues if the resulting savings are significant. So that would, look to pay it off if we had some opportunities there. And then we have to maintain an adequate debt service fund regarding any bond issuance to ensure that we're able to maintain the payment on any one of those. And then we seek to maintain a high bond rating for our borrowing costs. Looking at our cash management investment policies. So we're looking that we deposit all of our cash receipts within 72 hours of receipt. That we would look to collect our revenues aggressively, including any of those past due bills, utilize any type of outside collection agency to accomplish this. Currently, we're not doing that, but it is an item that we're going to be looking into. The city, we'd be looking to maintain our cash management and our investment program in order to meet those daily cash requirements, and then look to increase any available funds and investment to ensure that we're looking at our maximum rate of returns. We're currently working with a financial advisor to determine what is a good investment policy and approach for us moving forward. And then again, we'll be looking at presenting those quarterly reports on investments as well to this committee. So that could be something that we include as consent for the city commission, since we're looking to provide that to this group. And then we're permitted by law, we'll just look for a pool cash for each one of those eligible funds for investment purposes. Moving on to our accounting, auditing, and financial reporting, we will be looking at, this is just audit best practices or audit requirements really, but on an annual basis, we do provide an audit management letter when we receive those recommendations. We have to determine any proper actions or responses to those recommendations, and then we need to ensure that those are completed. So anytime they're doing an audit, they will give us recommendations. Our goal is to have zero and zero audit findings, so we'll get there. But in order for us to do that, we do have to correct or resolve those matters that are included as part of that management letter. We will have those financial reports in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles. Again, the commission will be provided monthly budget reports comparing actuals. That could be something that we're posting on the city website or part of one of our weekly ops. And then currently we do receive or seek to receive our certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. So that is something that the city has done for 27 years, I want to say, on the annual comprehensive report side. So we are moving towards that with our budget this year. And then again, we'll just maintain the highest level of accounting practices per GAAP and per the GASB Accounting Standards Board. When we're looking at our capital improvement plan policy, so there's kind of two pieces here. One is a capital asset in the sense that you're going to book it as a capital asset. So right now, our dollar figure on that is $5,000, and it has a useful life of more than 1 year. So those are items that we're looking at setting up a depreciation schedule and capitalizing. But we also, as we're thinking about the budget process, we were looking at a multi-year capital improvement plan. And so those are going to be items that you'll see in the capital improvement plan of $20,000 or more. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And then when we're looking at our estimated useful life of each one of those, you can see that that's the depreciation schedule that we're going to follow when we're looking at either buildings or improvement, furniture, machinery, and equipment and infrastructure. And continuation of looking at our capital improvement policies. So we will coordinate in the development of our CIP and our operating budget just to ensure that any of those future operating expenditures and revenues associated with the new capital improvement will be projected and incorporated into some of those future operating budgets. That's kind of the pickleball example I used earlier. We'll be looking at the least costly financial method for all of our new capital improvement projects. So by way of looking at design, engineering, or what options we have there. And then all projects in the city comprehensive plan will be included in the capital improvement plan, and the city will use a priority ranking system for capital projects. I did want to take a pause on that one as we look into 2027. One of the things we'll be asking this group to do is help us codify and define a prioritization process for our capital projects. This year we were very much focused on recovery, and so you guys saw that that process had a very big recovery focus. What we'd like to get to is a process by which this committee says, yes, we like that, and that might be looking at something where a project is a recovery project, we're building it back better, maybe it's a mandatory project versus an enhancement project, and so we'll bring forward a staff recommendation on that, but that'll be something that we work with the committee for as we look into 2027. Because ideally, we're not hopefully always going to be in a restore place, and this committee, to have that flexibility, might say, well, let's look at some enhancement projects and let's prioritize those in the future years, thinking that we're not always going to be in a recovery type of environment. So that'll be something we bring back to the committee in 2027 as part of our budget process. And then you can see there, when we're looking at the Finance Budget Review Committee, we'll evaluate every proposed and ongoing project based on the criteria, and then prior to any project being included in the CIP, and then our city will maintain physical assets at a level that's adequate to protect our capital investment strategy. And I need to fix that because I just have an and. So sorry about that. That's a typo. I'll fix that. All right, so moving on, this budget calendar was originally presented to you all, and then we've included it kind of in our next steps and after action. What I think that this committee hasn't seen, and I apologize, it's so tiny, but is sort of that task description. So we're really launching into the budget process in April, going through and completing all of the information. We're starting off with our capital projects, and then we start moving into operating personnel and all of those different items, but wanted to provide sort of a background information of what's happening behind the scenes before all of this comes to this committee or to the commission. With that April launch that we're showing there, the intent again would be that we're able to have our financial reports completed, and then we're moving into that process. So just wanted to kind of show what that full timeline looks like for us and what we're doing behind the scenes. Okay. Financial summaries and revenue overviews. I'm not going to take this committee through each one of these different general fund revenues. I think you're all very familiar with our revenue sources. We talked about it in workshop number 1, but just wanted to show this is one of those GFOA best practices that you include a historical revenue forecast or what you're showing historically, and then what you're proposing year over year, and a definition of what each one of those looks like, so that the community and the commission can have that understanding. So I'm going to flip through these slides here unless anybody has a question about a specific revenue source. Okay. Okay, so as we're diving into our budget summary, so this is our highest level. The committee is aware that we do have a balanced budget today. I'm going to go through each one of these at a fund level, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this overall summary, but you can see here that was our governmental funds, and these are our proprietary funds, and that is all of our revenues, expenditures, and then finally that fund balance. A piece that we've added in and something that the team has been working on is a strategic roadmap. So this is our goalpost, or our guiding compass, if you will, for 2025 through 2027. As we're thinking about the budget process, each department went through and thought about, does this align with these different areas within the strategic roadmap, and the session that we had with our commission in defining these. So you'll see this getting rolled out further as we continue to get in there our objectives, our performance metrics, and how we plan to accomplish each one of these strategic initiatives. But next year, what we'll be looking to do is really a budgeting for outcomes model, where we're tying dollars to each one of these areas within the budget process. So, but it's certainly an important piece and a best practice as we're looking at our budget process. Okay, so diving into our governmental funds. So kicking off, when we're looking at the general fund, I have 2 highlights here. One of those is that other uses. You can see increased for us. That is our transfer over to the resiliency fund, as well as the transfer over to capital improvement fund. You can see that fund balance reserve is at that 35%, which is not inclusive of those other uses, since those are transfers. Really the intent there is that we're looking at what are our operating costs, not those capital transfers out.
So the question I have about this is cosmetic. FY 2025 actual. Is there any way that we can put through in a specific month?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a lot about these pieces and parts, but again, this is just where those revenue sources come from. So I won't spend any time on that piece. With our expenditure summaries, again, you can see that other uses category jumped up quite a bit with that transfers to resiliency and capital projects. And then as well as you can see that non-departmental, which is where we have those transfers out, as well as any debt service, became very much the largest bucket with those transfers out. No changes to our building fund, so I'm going to skip that. Here's our resiliency fund. So at the last workshop meeting, we didn't have any revenues or expenditures for fiscal year 2026 because the ad valorem taxes didn't show any increase. This is where you'll see intergovernmental revenue. We have 2 grants tied to 2 projects in here. One of those is our wastewater management plan, as well as the community seawall replacement. So those revenues came over with those projects, and then we have the $5.8 million of the general fund funding that we transferred over, as well as the $5.4 million in capital outlay that we anticipate for projects to spend. You'll see that we have a fund balance down there of the $3.2 million. The intent here is that we could utilize this for future adaptation projects, grant matches. When the city's looking at a grant, typically they're looking at a 25 city match to a 75% either state or federal, or if we can do better than that, absolutely. But this gives us an ability that we have some funds that we could leverage, or if the commission or the committee has some recommendations to say, let's utilize that funding on a project today, then that gives us some flexibility and that opportunity to do so. No changes to the multimodal fund, so I'm going to continue on with that. So our capital fund, again, those intergovernmental revenues, since we transferred the grants out of here that were connected to those 2 projects that I just mentioned, that went down a little bit. Our other sources, we were able to increase that transfer from the general fund up, and then with our capital outlay from some of those reappropriation projects, as well as the fire station, you can see that that total dollar capital outlay number increased. When we're looking at our fund balance ending, at the last workshop, we had a small ending fund balance in there. Now we're showing 1.3 million. So again, we have some opportunities there for projects, as well as if there was an additional change order or something of that nature as we're working through some of the projects. Fleet fund, that one's highlighted because we reduced out 3 vehicle replacements in 2026 budget. And then as we jump into our proprietary funds, that's just the high level overview of all of our proprietary funds, or enterprise funds. We didn't have any changes to our wastewater. The ending fund balance for 2026 is a little low, and so that'll be something that we'll be looking at, bringing back some fund balance recommendations on our enterprise funds. But again, I think we really need that fee study to have a full picture of what that looks like. Reclaimed water, again, not a super comfortable ending fund balance there, but we'll be bringing that back as we get those fee studies in. And then stormwater, I talked about this a little bit, but we did reduce down that transfer of $400,000 under other sources from the general fund, so that's another item. Parking fund, we didn't have any changes in there. Again, looking at our parking study, this would be something that we'd bring back as part of that mid-year adjustment, and we do have about $300,000 in capital outlay. In the event we have an opportunity to do something innovative with our parking, so we just have that as a kind of a earmark placeholder over there. And then our funded positions by department, no changes here. So total positions is still looking at 159.60. So again, even with those budgetary vacancy savings, the departments can still hire up to their FTE count, knowing that typically there's going to be some attrition in those departments, and we'll monitor that pretty closely. For our capital improvement plan, I'm just going to highlight the areas where we have changes. So once again, our resiliency fund, you can see we have that increase. The dune walkovers, Egan Park, facility roof replacements, public services building improvements, those are all reappropriation projects that we're straddling those 2 fiscal years. Fire Station 22 has that increase in there for up to $7 million for that project. So you can see that there. And then the right-of-way median improvements and the VA shuffleboard building, those were 2 items that had a reappropriation from 25 to 26. So I'll kind of fly through these slides. These are the definition and the 5-year plan looking at each one of these different projects, but we've seen these quite a few times, so I'll go through them. But again, I have highlighted out here any of those projects where we're showing a change from workshop number 4 to workshop number 5. So I'm just gonna keep moving through some of these here. And I'll take a quick pause on the resiliency fund. So prior workshop, there was not any projects listed in here, but wanted to provide the opportunity for the committee to see some of those projects that we have in the out years. Obviously, once we start looking at even fiscal year 2027, we've got a pretty large dollar figure at the end of that year. So anywhere where we can maybe leverage some of that $3.2 million for grants or things of that nature would obviously be very beneficial to the city in completing these projects. And then what we're looking for here is just any committee consensus on the tentative budget. I think we've got, I know Francis and I have gotten notes just on any of the financial policies, but I did want to share at our November 5th meeting, which is our next scheduled meeting, we'll be looking to do an after action. So it'll be hopefully a lot of you guys talking and not me talking as much, but wanting to understand what opportunities for improvement we can do as we move into 27. How can we do better on the budget process? What recommendations you have just on the finance piece in general of areas that we can improve upon? One of those that I wanted to call out is it's not my preference to send you guys stuff 2 days in advance. We'd like to do it 2 weeks in advance, and then that gives the commission 3 weeks to review the information in the public. So just wanted to say that that is not a precedence that will exist in 2027, but any other feedback you have on the process, on the information, on the content, that's what we really want to focus on November 5th. So
And it's at 3 o'clock? Do you have a time?
I have
Is that at
4.
3 o'clock?
November 5th.
It can be 2:30 or 3, whatever you all prefer.
For some reason, I have it on my calendar at 3, so I just wanted to confirm since it's kind of out.
3 o'clock is fine.
3 o'clock?
Is that fine with you? You said you had it at 4.
No, it was just on my calendar for 4.
Mine's at 3, so, yeah, that's 3 o'clock, if everyone works. I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 o'clock.
So we're at that point, just looking at some of those next steps. So on Tuesday, the commission will look at the same budget workshop number 5 with your recommendations on the policy, financial policies, and any other discussion items that you want to talk about as far as the budget, and anything that staff should consider or include as part of that committee recommendation. The other thing that we're doing is we added on a presentation onto the beginning of the 6 p.m. meeting. What that does for us is it gives the opportunity for any public comment in advance of the first public hearing, where we're looking at the first reading and adoption, but it also gives the opportunity for the commission, if they'd like to have more discussion on the budget process at the beginning of that meeting, gives them some flexibility there. So with that, I am going to jump back to this slide and let you guys talk. So thank you.
So you want us on the 8th of September here?
This is the next steps for budget adoption. So that'll be at 6 p.m. You all are more than welcome to attend. That is our regular 6 p.m. meeting that we have for the first public hearing on the budget and the millage setting. And then we'll do the second public hearing on September 22nd, and that'll be that budget adoption process. So that's at the regular city commission meeting. Just wanted to highlight kind of where we're at in the process and what our next steps are for getting this budget approved.
Obviously, you've done a tremendous amount of work in a short period of time, which I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
I appreciate the improvement compared to what we've seen in the past, and the plan to move forward with better policies and procedures. Any other comments?
I know in the beginning when I first got here, I think it was 2023, I started on this committee, that my commissioner asked me if I felt comfortable with where we're at, and I said no, because I don't know, what's going on the other side of the balance sheet, and I feel comfortable now, and I told my commissioner that I feel like I can talk to anybody on the island and say, yes, I feel like these numbers are the right numbers. There's always going to be questions about whether capital items are a little low or a little inflated, and that's just normal business. That's always going to happen, but I feel comfortable. I do have a couple questions.
Sure.
Is the budget inputted on a monthly basis, or is it on a yearly basis into the system?
So the total budget, once adopted, we would move because we're in the new financial system is where we've created this budget. We'll move that to an adopted budget. And so that is on an annual basis, and unless we bring back a ordinance change and the city commission makes a change to amend the budget, but it is on an annual basis after adoption.
Okay.
So when we launch October 1st in that new fiscal year, we have the budget set
You just put the numbers in for what's going on for the year.
on an annual basis, yep.
On the salary and wages, on the ones that we received last night, that it still has executive salaries. It's going back and forth with executive salaries and salaries and wages. Could we either merge them together or just pick a consistent one to stay with?
Yeah, we can fix that. That's the executive salaries really should be at city clerk, city manager, and commission level. But we'll make sure that that's identified. That's just looking at the uniform accounting system, and so it's likely that in the system we just grabbed the wrong one. So we'll go ahead and fix that.
Gotcha. The next one is traditionally the last month and a half, so from mid-August to the end of September, and earmarks are the ones where most waste happens. So I just want to make sure that we're scrutinizing now more than yet ever as managers. So, and that's, the last thing, I do think that our biggest problem as a city is our financial relationship with the county. I feel that we have earned more than we're getting, and that's where our problems are. I don't feel like it's in the tax rate. I don't feel like it's in the fines. I feel like it's in our relationship with the county. And I talked to my commissioner about that, and she agrees with me, and hopefully we can work forward in figuring out ways that we can get more money back from the county.
I think all the coastal communities feel that same way.
Yes.
We talked about that last time, too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We will continue.
yeah.
It's been an ongoing discussion that the county really hasn't, in my experience, responded very positively to.
I heard
Say
it.
that again?
The county hasn't responded over the years
Is it
positively.
Is it true that it's just the county commissioner the county manager and not the county commissioners? The county commissioners have all responded positively, and the county manager is the one that's saying, no, we're going to accept your money and that's it.
I'll just comment that I am working very hard to build a relationship with, I will say that he's essentially my peer, just at the county level. And I'm also working with our commission, and we can work with you as well to meet regularly with our county commissioners, the elected and appointed body, because those are your peers. So there you will see a very assertive effort this year to take both of those approaches and continue these conversations.
Good, thank you.
I think that's something we need to codify. We need to come up with a statement, I believe, as a city, and then speak as a whole, and get our residents to join in on that. You know, when we're shouldering the burden of increased tourism and people coming to visit, and that rests with the taxpayers that are paying the ad valorem taxes here, as you broke out the last workshop, that's something that I think the city needs to adopt, a policy, and maybe the mayor takes that to the big C, and they can all join in. But I think our city could go ahead and set that leadership post out there and get our residents to chime in.
And can we, I guess we can talk to our commissioner. I've never talked to our Pinellas County Commissioner before.
Oh, absolutely.
But I'm talking about as a resident.
Absolutely, sure.
Do it, everybody.
But let's come up with something that's cogent and precise and things like that to draw attention to it. I mean, again, we look at the tourist development tax, and we're joined in with Tierra Verde. Well, we bring in the second most, or we did. And as we recover, as our businesses recover, as the hotels recover, I'm sure we're going to get back to that same level.
Agreed.
Yeah, but it seems like the commissioners, are they called the commissioners there? Are like kind of in our favor. It's stopping somewhere. I just don't know where it's stopping. So.
Your agenda item?
Oh, my agenda
Yeah,
item.
your agenda item.
So.
Total distribution of taxes by
Just,
district.
Yes. So I know we talked a little in the financial policy discussion about how we come up with our mainly CIP. But I've gone to two meetings. I've gone to meetings in two different districts, which is the district that I represent for Commissioner Marriott and my district that I live in. And both of them, I've heard the same thing over and over again. It's all the money's going to Pass the Grill. I know we have a couple Pass the Grill people here, but it's something that I should bring up because you know, the people are wondering this. This is a concern of theirs. Is the money, all the money, tax money going to Pass the Grill? Is it being distributed equally? What is equally? So that's something that I think that we're going to have to address because I think the commissioners need to address it to their people. Yeah.
Well, if you look at the capital improvement projects, you can see that most of them are citywide, unless you're replacing seawalls. But yes, I've heard that from people that the city, why is the city spending more in Pass the Grill? In a just casual conversation. I don't see it in reality. I mean, you could do some research and come up with the numbers. So I don't know what the suggestion is to move forward, other than to do some analysis to see where the money's being spent by district.
I think the irony is the Pass the Grill folks don't believe that. So it's.
As you speak, you know what?
Well, no, we just had a meeting the other day, and there were a lot of projects that were discussed, and there was some frustration because they felt they weren't all being addressed.
Quickly enough.
Yes.
But I think that's the entire city right now.
Right.
You know, because of the recovery situation that we're in.
Right.
You know, if we were in a normal situation, let's just say prior to the hurricanes, would a district feel like left, you know, like that they weren't? That's what I'm curious about. And I'm so new, I don't know that, right? So was it?
There was a massive effort to clean up Pass the Grill after the storms. It was
There was.
definitely worse than other
Hands down.
districts.
Hands down. Yeah.
That's reality.
They got it worse, yes.
And where they are and everything that happened. So if you look at the dollars as a recovery, that's probably real. But prior to that, I don't remember any instances where people said we're spending more in Paso Grill. We heard from Paso Grill residents, like, why aren't you fixing our alleys? Why is it taking so long to do things like that? Fix the walkovers. We need more bathrooms in the restroom area. So I just, it may be tied into the massive recovery effort.
I would say
This was more the undergrounding, the repaving the streets, the palm trees, the seawalls. Like, I mean, there's not a right or wrong here. I think it's more of a transparency question. So the best thing to do, and there's also, like, what is equitable? Is it the amount of dollars that come from that district? Is it the amount of dollars that come from the city divided by 4? Then you also have to put in, okay, should that subtract the amount of parking revenue that we get from that? Because, you know, if we get parking revenue in Paso Grill, yeah, maybe we should put more money into Paso Grill so we can get more parking revenue out of it. Or is it that you have, like, your, I think they call it the mall philosophy, which is you have an anchor here and you have an anchor here, and then you try to build them together, and that's the best way to get investment. Or you have your urban philosophy, which is put an epicenter and then build out from the epicenter, which is another way to get investment type of philosophy. So there's a lot of questions on, well, what is right, what is wrong? And then when you think about where the money comes from, okay, we're looking at Paso Grill, and the big thing is, okay, all the, you know, wealthy people live in Paso Grill, right? But, like, if you look at it, I mean, all the large condos are on the north side, or on the district that I represent. So when people say, okay, well, maybe it should be the percentage of dollars that are coming in, well, maybe Paso Grill's not going to get that much money, or maybe the one that I live in, District 3, is not going to get that much money because we don't have as many high rises. And we don't want high rises. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we might be misled of what we think brings in the most money and where the most money is going on a net. So I think maybe we should put together a spreadsheet, and maybe the people should put together a spreadsheet of where the investments are going, what they think the weight is on those investments. For instance, the libraries should be divided by 4. It should be 25% to every district. The community center, 25% to every district. And then maybe we figure out, where is the money really going? And are these, you know, are these complaints really, maybe they are right. Maybe it is a lot more money going there, but maybe they're completely wrong.
I think we did a good job with the capital improvement prioritization.
Yeah.
You know, we got the input from public services, and then we looked for synergy for the resiliency, for the recovery and things like that, and then racked and stacked those. Those were necessities. And I wouldn't say it's district specific. We looked at it
No,
as a city.
Want
Yeah.
versus must.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the philosophy we went through in those capital. These things must be done, these things will be nice.
So I think maybe, you know, there's a lot of misinformation, and people can look at the prioritization of those, and they can listen to our meeting and our discussion about that. And I'd say that's probably up to each commissioner to communicate that to their districts.
I think it would be a good exercise just to show them, though, just to show anybody who asks that question, where's my money going to?
For this past year, for 2025?
Well,
I think
If I can comment, because I've been through this exercise with other communities, it's not a bad exercise. So I would ask, maybe we could add this to a future agenda after the budget's adopted. Luckily, we have this new financial system now that's going to allow manipulation of data. We have a GIS system that can map overlays on projects. And so just as your city manager, it tells a whole different story. And it's not a bad transparency exercise, and it does tend to help you prioritize as you're moving forward, even between the wants and needs, because you have needs in every district. So now you're really grappling with, okay, which needs are more prevalent or more expensive, or do those drive assessments because the needs in one district are 50 million and the needs over here are 2, And so you really start to be able to peel the layers of that onion back. And so I'm open to it. We just need a little bit of time and maybe bring a future agenda item back with a presentation. And we'll, we're kind of geeks on this stuff too. So, I mean, there's a side of me that it's an exciting project, but we just need a little bit of time to put it together.
Right.
Understood.
Could I offer something as a way to communicate it? Perhaps a map of the city, and then show where the capital improvement programs are going, show where the maintenance is needed, and things like that for each district. And that way somebody could, and if you really got fancy and geeked out on it, as you said, you could put a hyperlink on there that showed the project, showed the description that we all looked at as we prioritized, the expenditures, and the timeline. And then anybody could have access to that and look at each project for themselves. I know down in District 4, during one of the meetings, it was asked, when is this going to be done? When is that going to be done? If we give the community their own tool to use, then it kind of answers those questions.
Okay, I like it.
That was it for my agenda item.
That was your agenda item.
Well done.
Thank you.
Very interesting, actually.
Any other
Well,
comments?
there's a fine line there too, because you don't want districts to start getting mad at other districts.
Right.
There really is, and for me, just kind of absorbing this, going, you gotta find that balance, to where we're all still the same city and we gotta work together regardless. So it's never gonna be equal, so we gotta never make that expectation either. We're all together. That's my 2 cents, with, yeah.
So should we put it on an agenda item for, I guess it wouldn't be November 5th, it would be the next meeting
Yeah,
after
maybe if you
that.
can give us early 2026.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, sure.
And then just wanted to make sure that there was overall consensus just with what we've presented in the tentative budget, no changes there, other than what we've talked about with the financial policy changes.
No, I haven't seen heard any dollar changes.
Okay, all right.
I think it's well presented, thank you. And then we had a few comments. If you want to just summarize those.
Yes, so we had comments as it relates to the financial policies, defining what those quarterly reports would be back to our city commission. Looking at, let me 1 second, sorry, let me pull up those summary notes there. So balance sheet, income statements, fund balance required quarterly, looking at if we have the opportunity to seek nonprofit grants for maybe environmental, understanding just some of our revenue recognition policies. I owe some follow-up on regards to when we receive some of those fines, memberships, things of that nature. User fees, when are those booked? And then coming back with mapping for what we're looking at by district and community projects and what that looks like as it compares to our revenue sources.
Should that be part of the next agendas, or that addition to the agenda for next time? And let them finish the budget now with the map thing?
The map thing is
Next
Two
year.
For
Yeah, I think she
January,
said Next year.
Okay.
Next year.
Okay.
if that's
There's a
okay.
lot's going on, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, you don't see them 24 hours?
We'll figure it out.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Are there any audience comments?
If I could just say a general thank you. These folks are all of our leadership team behind the scenes, and
Yes.
thank you to all of you, because they're back there pulling together all of the information for us and writing all the descriptions, and I'm just the voice behind it. So thank you, and a special shout out to Vanessa Sanchez, our budget management analyst. She did a fantastic job and spent a lot of late nights with me. So thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.
A lot, yeah.
Thank you all.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of work, obviously, that went into this. Well done.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Devin and Francis. Anything else? Meeting adjourned.
All right,